Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growth Stage podcast by FastSpring, where we discuss how SaaS, software, and digital product companies grow revenue, build meaningful products, and increase the value of their businesses. I'm David Vogelpohl. I support the digital product community through my role at FastSpring, and I love to bring the best of the community to you here on the Growth Stage podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that means a lot to me, very interesting and challenging part I find of digital businesses, which is successfully switching from one-time fees to subscriptions. We often see this in the software universe. And joining us for that conversation today is someone much like myself who's been through this before, with a lot of war stories to tell. I'd like to welcome to Growth Stage, Mr. Fred Linfjärd. Fred, welcome to Growth Stage.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
And it's Linfjärd. I didn't say that right. I practiced and I got it wrong, Fred.
You're not the only one. It's totally okay. It's perfect.
Us Vogelpohls had no idea what you're talking about. But thanks for coming on. Really glad to have you here, and really interested to hear your story around this idea of successfully switching from one time to recurring. So for those listening and watching, what Fred is going to talk about is that switch from one time to recurring billing models. But he's going to share his thoughts on why digital product companies who aren't doing that should embrace subscriptions, how to justify the switch to your one-time customer base, so people who've already been buying your product for one-time fees, avoiding the worst of community blowback. The change to subscription can cause some anxiety for folks, and some of the must-do tactics for your own rollout plan. So if you're in the midst of it or you're planning a switch, this is going to be a good episode for you. All right, Fred, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every guest of Growth Stage. What was the first thing you bought online?
I bought, it was a long time ago, and I think it was a book from Amazon. I know it's boring, but at the time, I think they kind of only sold books, or it wasn't like it was today, at least. So I would go with that, a book from Amazon.
Do you recall what the book was? Was it How to Buy Things Online?
I think it was some type of it was the early 2000s, I guess. I think it was some kind of book on maybe affiliate marketing or maybe it was HTML for dummies. I don't know.
Well, I know a lot of HTML and affiliate OGs, so I'm now dying to know the author, but maybe I'll save that question for your next time on Growth Stage. But a book on Amazon, that's pretty on the nose. I like that. Okay, and then you're with a company called Planday. Can you tell us a little bit about what Planday does and what you do there?
Sure, yeah. So Planday is, I think the category is called Workforce Management Platform. So B2B SaaS solve needs when it comes to scheduling and time and attendance. So for shift workers serving industries like hospitality, restaurants, hotels, and all these things. And I'm the director of growth there. So yeah, I pretty much try to make sure that everything from acquisition to monetization plays together well, and we drive profitable growth.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. And the topic we're talking about today, the switch from one-time to recurring subscriptions, a lot of your war stories are rooted in one particular company switch to that. What company was that? And from the high level, could you tell us about kind of what was happening at that time?
Sure. Yeah. So I worked at a company called Capture One a few years back, and it's a photo editing software, desktop software, and biggest competitor is Adobe Lightroom, and Capture One is really a software, and the company was born out of a camera manufacturing business called Phase One that later then the software part became acquired, and I was kind of hired to drive and build that out, that software business.
And so it was image software effectively.
Yeah, raw converter. So a raw converter software to really get the big pictures in, and you need a lot of power, and that software became really good. because it had to be good to power the phase one cameras, and then they wanted to kind of monetize that and open it up for other camera brands and make its own business out of it.
So you mentioned Adobe Lightroom as the biggest competitor. The switch from one time to subscription for Capture One, was this around the same time that Adobe's Creative Suite was coming out and they themselves were adopting a more recurring revenue model?
Yeah, so I think so. So this was back in 2017, I think, and so Capture One had sort of a kindling business on the software. We actually had a home built, you know, e-commerce system and an entitlement system, license management system, and we had some subscriptions, but it was very it was a very very small amount, and the big business was, you know, perpetual and selling these licenses to the software. So
I'm chuckling a little bit internally, Fred, because around that same year, I was in the middle of my own management of a switch from one-time software to recurring in the Studio Press business, the WordPress themes that were sold for one time that were going to a
yeah.
recurring model with like a package. And so I just imagine us both back in 2017 doing this together and not knowing each other at that time. So, you know, you talked about how Capture One kind of wanted to take advantage more of subscriptions. I mentioned how Adobe, had made the shift from one time to subscription in the way they went to market. But I mean, like, why? Why make this shift when your customers are so used to doing it a certain way? Um, and you're going to come in and disrupt everything. I mean, especially like Adobe was a massive business, but why do this?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is it's a fundamentally uh, different way on how you do business when you sell a perpetual versus when you sell a subscription, obviously, right? So and so it means that you know, you have to do so much stuff to be able to sustain a constant cash flow. So, you know, every time you release a software version and you want people to upgrade, you need to pay money for it, you know, with paid ads, your time on sending out emails, and all these things. And it's just very it's not a sustainable way to grow a business like that. And I think at that time, more and more companies really wanted to get into the subscription part because they just know how much they can do within their company if they would have a working sustainable subscription model. You'll be able to grow faster, hire more people. You will have you don't need to spend as much every time you're trying to sell an upgrade to your software. So yeah, it's kind of the holy
It's
grail you want.
Yeah, and I've known a lot of people that have one-time software businesses and have participated in them at very deep levels on multiple occasions. And you pointed out it was like the release is everything, right? Like the next version of Photoshop is like going to be the big money maker for Adobe or something. I mean, it sounds like that was the case at Capture One as well, where like these major releases have to be coupled with marketing and go to market efforts and like the features in them and the go to market had better work, or you're going to miss your revenue. And there's not much you can do about that because you're not getting a lot of lift from the work you did before. Is that a fair way to assess that situation at Capture One?
Absolutely, and it's not just about the go to market. This actually trickles down into product development, product management. The way you do releases it's so different and more smoother and sustainable when you're on a subscription model, because when you do these upgrade releases, it gets very rushed, right? And you need to make sure that all these different features, they are really like if I hit, you know, the majority of people that has purchase power with the feature release, then I'll get more money, right? But what if I hit the wrong one? Because, you know, some updates is you have to do, right? Even if they're boring, maybe even if they don't give you that wow thing, you know, to oh wow, this is a new cool thing. Now I'm going to get a lot of new people in, right? So it's always that struggle, and you make start making wrong choices, and you're actually, you know, degrading your product, I would say, even to some point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And then, of course, you're kind of incentivized to keep your best features for your next major release. And so the combination of those things really moves away from kind of agile methodologies and continuous improvement and really kind of creates these like blockbuster moments for your release, which can be put pressure on your roadmap in the ways you kind of talked about.
You always have to
So
trump them also, right? So every time there's got to be something more cooler and cooler.
right, totally. And you're really trying to earn the renewal effectively from the customer. The other issue I found, at least in my own experience, was this idea of maintenance, where
Hmm.
especially if you don't necessarily version it and charge for the next version or something, like maybe you're giving away like lifetime updates or something like that, it can start to put pressure on your return for maintaining that older software that people might still rely on for some reason. Was that an issue at Capture One, or was maintenance of prior versions not much of a concern when you thought about subscriptions versus one time?
I think that I capture one. I think I never seen such a generous, you know, maintenance thing. I think we were and I think we suffered of an old EULA or something, because it's like, yeah, we will make sure you have updates for, you know, the next 10 years or
Forever.
something. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously we had to go in and change that anyways, but it's and even if you don't even, people might not even write that in their EULA, and then people might just, well, you're not saying that you shouldn't update and keep it up to date, so where's my update, you know?
Yeah, even if you don't say it, you still might have negative community sentiment if like your versions prior torches someone's photo business or something like that. And then that can have ramifications that put pressure on you to just do it anyways, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, it's interesting. You brought up the kind of forever updates. I brought up updates, but kind of the conversation led to the idea of like forever maintenance. And I've worked in acquisitions and led acquisitions in the past. And one of the things that often comes up in diligence when a business has a product like that, and I remember hearing this one time from a finance person that was really funny. They were trying to understand the risk over time of buying the business and what the business had to deliver for their customers. And they said, David, they promised infinite upgrade or updates. I can't divide by infinity. And so I was like, yeah, you can't. Look at that. Huh? So this kind of gets us to the KPI side. And we talked about, I asked you like, why do this? And, it was funny. One thing you didn't mention was a lot about was you'll make a bunch more money because you can build on that revenue and success. You talked a lot about the kind of greater benefits. But let's kind of get down to the KPI. Like, what are the primary KPI people really should be paying attention to, um, as they embark on an adventure to make this kind of shift? Like, what should be on their dashboard?
Yeah, so I mean, so they're fundamentally different when you think about, when I think back about how we ran the business on a perpetual metrics. Like, you wouldn't see inkling or a metric that would indicate that our customers are satisfied. Like, that usually don't exist on a perpetual dashboard. Contra to a subscription dashboard where you have metrics like CLV, or customer lifetime value, that it really indicates that, if that goes down, it means really that people are not happy with the product. And follow up on that, you have the churn metric, right? So how many people are leaving your business, either by voluntary churn, right? So they cancel it, and because they're not happy. And then you have, of course, the typical recurring revenue metrics like MRR or ARR, right? Monthly recurring revenue, and annual recurring revenue, that just kind of builds up, right? That, it's like a stair. It will always go up, right? And you can work towards increasing those. So it's a very different way of doing business. So it also goes into that this becomes a little bit of a change management exercise. There's so many different things. This is not the traditional pricing exercise like you might do in SaaS or something like that, where you go in and you have product marketing and you like you try different pricing. This is goes into the whole business, how you go to market, how you measure your business, how you develop your product. And I think that's where it usually fails, or it becomes a struggle. It takes longer time because there's many different departments and people that need to basically follow a very disciplined plan, which you don't really know yet. So you kind of have to chop it up and kind of test your way forward. Have a very kind of, I mean, you really need like a project manager to say, or put together a group of people that are working with this, dedicatedly, and not have like five different other jobs to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
I know I
does.
went over the off topic here a little bit with the key
No,
metrics,
no, it's
but
good because I think you kind of clued in a little bit. When people make this change, there's often the need to make changes. To your point, you have to make changes in your organization. Like even your billing people need to be trained on the new thing. Their systems, of course, need to be changed. Tech support people. And you kind of mentioned product, and it's funny because when I've seen companies make this shift, the question that usually comes up from the audience is, why should I pay recurring now? And so this becomes like a driving force for these teams as they're starting to think about how to roll it out. Is like, how are we going to justify it to the community? And I've seen many times that the new recurring offering has some sort of like new product features like baked into it that is an additional benefit above and beyond the one time. Has that been your experience, or was that how
yeah.
Capture One approached it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's also uh, the biggest, I would say, obstacle. It's that fear that, are we basically just nuking our business by doing this? Everyone's going to leave, right? And it is not actually that, because you have to think about it. You have to segment your customers, right? Right. So you have new people that are coming in, like they don't really know, right? So every new person that comes in, if you only have a subscription, they came to get your software. I mean, if they're motivated, they're not going to leave just because there's no perpetual, right? So you can put them to the side there, and that's really what your goal is, to grow your business, right? Because if you think about it, the metric of customer lifetime value, which means that you're going to work and make more money on your existing customers, that's really a subscription metric. But you're trying to apply it to a perpetual business that is not going to be profitable. So I would segment it into these different buckets: new and current. And then I will take the current bucket and I would put in, you know, the VIP group, the early adopters, or the really hardcore people that, can, if something happens and they're not happy, they could just blow up social media. You need to have a backup plan for these, right? And then you have the existing customers that, okay, well, we're not making this much money. Like, let's say they buy the software and they've never upgraded. They buy the software and maybe upgrade every third time. So you try to just get those that upgrade every time there's a new release. You want to make
So
an offer for them, so that would work for them, right?
yeah,
Also.
absolutely. And like you're talking kind of about a bit of a recurring revenue model. And I think like when you have one-time fees, but you charge for the next version, in other words, you don't get, free lifetime upgrades or something like that, then their rate of buying the updated versions essentially becomes their recurring revenue. And the collection of those transactions is their LTV. And so, like when you were thinking through the KPI as you embarked on this, some of the things you said in the response so far was like, my signups I'm guessing you were looking at like, did they go up or down? Because now we're a subscription for new customers.
Hmm.
Um, you were probably wondering about your churn rate by the end of the year and what you think the LTV of those subscriptions would be. And then I'm guessing you might have compared that to what you thought the LTV of your one-time download customers were. Is this kind of how you might think of the blend, at least on the new customer side?
Yeah, I mean, we tried a lot to try to, like, how do you calculate churn on upgrades, right? Because every time we need to sell an upgrade, they need to fork out their credit card. So it's really hard, and especially when you're doing the switch, like us, we had you're living in that no man's land where you have perpetual and you have subscriptions, and I hope we'll get into that also because that is a place that's hard to be in. And you're trying to also calculate the business with these two very, very different motions, and it becomes really, really really hard to do, right? Um, so I don't know
Did
if
you
that
look at
answered
the
your question.
data separately for brand new customers versus the one-time download historical customers? No, in other words, were you tracking the adoption rate from the old customers for the new offering?
Yeah, we looked at that, and we try to look at it separately, and here
Was it
it's
a focus, or was it just like leave them alone? They already bought it. If they want the new thing, they'll buy it. Or did you actively try to get them to convert?
well, we tried to actively get them to convert, but we also saw that that was really hard because you're talking with everyone, right? Especially, I don't know if you don't have the most advanced automation setup, which we in the end we actually did have a good setup, but you're talking with everyone, which means that you're going to talk to these people that I bought the perpetual license, I own this, and now I'm going to rent it, and it's like,
Right, right.
and you and they're going to make noise, right? So so you need to have a plan for that, and not try to uh, yeah, and not try to look at it in the same way. But the problem here, David, is that it's focus. Like, how are you going to focus on switching to perpetual when you're doing that? Your peak revenues, right? Every upgrade, that's where all the money comes in, right? And now you're going to switch to, you know, that instead. You don't get that focus, which means you're kind of slowly dying, or it's really, really hard to maintain a business like that. That's why you need a really, really solid plan with steps and success metrics, and also uh, have the guts to kind of follow in on it. And you see some company does, and there's going to be people leaving, right? But you got to have faith in your product and the offer that you create on that subscription, that it's fair, that it makes sense, that it's easy to get out of and then come into again, that kind of stuff. I don't know, I'm babbling
So
here. Does that make
I
sense?
do. Yeah, it does. It does. And I do want to kind of get in a little bit into the the aspect of like, well, what entitlements do you offer, and how do you think about that in your strategy? But let's just say entitlements are the same between your subscription and one-time offering. What are the benefits to the end customer for buying software through a subscription? Like, nobody ever wants to rent their thing, I guess, but I mean, certainly there's a benefit for them and not just the company. But what are some benefits of buying software in a subscription model over one time? Obviously, costs might be a negative, but what are some good things about it for the end customer?
Well, I mean, for once, if you do it right, it's always the latest version, right? When you're on the subscription, so you don't have to, fork out 300 and 400 bucks to get that one feature, and it can be a more maintainable, steady sum that you pay 20 euro or whatever it is monthly, or maybe it's annually. And if you don't need it anymore, then you don't have to pay, right? And I think now that's the normal, but I think back then it wasn't really, especially not for the people that feel that, well, I mean, I want to own it. I mean, uh but so you kind of have to, I think maintenance is that one part, and I also think you can shape the offer so it's uh, you get something different with the subscription. Like, you get something that you don't get with the perpetual, and that would be a strategy to play around with, right? Uh, so so that's the benefit of the subscription, the that I see, right? It's the play pause kind of thing, and you can kind of, it's predictable, right? How your cost, and what you get out of it. You know that you always will get the latest, and maybe some more, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You talked about how at that time, kind of making a reference to the idea that people are more used to paying subscription fees for software products these days. I'm guessing big part and thanks to the rise of SaaS, but also thanks in the rise of downloadable software companies switching to subscription for all the reasons we just talked about. And so it does feel like there's less and less options in particular niches to pay one-time fees for software. And it seems like people are getting more used to it. I do think there's a decent amount of ignorance around out there around what is required to properly maintain software and operate a successful software business. But I think just the emotional side of like I don't want to rent my software, especially if you're in a space where that hasn't really been done much, can be trouble. But it does seem like the sentiment has been changing, especially both from the consumer side, but also from the software company side. Do you agree with that, or would you think of that differently?
No, I think so. I definitely think so, and I think it's important to also think in ways on kind of stretching your product offering. Like you can have both. It shouldn't just but it should never be the same, with some exceptions. Like you have your base product, right? That should be your subscription, but then you can add on, like with Capture One, we had style packs that we came up with, and which filters that you can kind of sell, and you can play around with those things, and bundle it and include it in subscription, or have it standalone or whatever. But you should have your core should always be in one uh, model, either perpetual or in subscription. And I mean, or you find a hybrid like Atlassian, or some of those guys that, I buy it for $300, and then I pay a monthly fee for having it fully up to date. And when I stop paying, well, then I still own the software. I can still use it, but it'll never get updated again. Stuff like that is things that you can think about. So it's very
Pay for the
dependent on how your
updates
business is.
model. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the pay for the updates model. The other one I really like is where you charge the subscription for feature sets within the software. So the core software stays the same, but you have like an add-on pack that's like SaaS enabled or something like that. And then you do the subscription that way. I've seen people find success with that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think, I mean, especially in B2B SaaS versus, I don't know what you call it, like, or other types of SaaS that maybe isn't the type that Planday has. Like a Planday type B2B SaaS, we have our 3 plans, right? But I think it's important to think about different ways to monetize, and just constantly modularize your software, because that unlocks these different uh, you know growth levers that you can work with, because it's always going to be a better business practice to get money from your existing customers than always trying to get new, right?
It's
Always trying to
cheaper
get new.
to keep a customer than to get a new one, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Um, Okay. So it sounds like in general, though, when you think of subscriptions and the shift from one time to subscriptions, it does sound like you do like to include additional features and not just like a one for one switch. And those new entitlements or features are kind of sweetening the pot for the existing customers to adopt the subscription model. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, in the end of the day, you're going to have to try to convince these customers. But I think it's also important to, as I said in the beginning, it's totally okay with doing grandfathering, right? And like, if you have these group of hardcore players, like you can have something special, like kind of pay them to to be quiet kind of deal or whatever, like that, because they are advocates, right? And you have to remember that, but it doesn't mean that that applies to all. So it's important with the segmentation on your business and your existing customer base, and also the customer base that you want, or you're trying to penetrate a new vertical or something.
It's funny you bring up this idea of legacy entitlements. Like, I have old customers, and I'm going to let them keep the same entitlements, and it's only new people that are affected by the new way. The idea of like grandfathering, I guess. Um, I have a memory of my own rollout for this at one point, and we did legacy entitlements, let people keep their old stuff, but people didn't read it that way. They thought we were changing it for them, and they still got mad, and social blew up. And I spent the whole week on chasing down Facebook and Twitter threads. It was pretty bad, but we they just didn't clearly state, I guess, high enough in the announcement that it was the legacy entitlements. And so, you try and try and try to make the rollout, accepted by the community. And like, no matter what you do, some people are going to get mad. And I've rarely seen a company roll this out where there wasn't the community kind of getting up in arms around it. And I've seen people do better and worse jobs at it, but it always happens, in my view, or at least from what I've seen. But what are some techniques? How can you approach your rollout where you reduce the chances that people get mad?
I mean, I think to me it's simple. I'm not, and I don't, the way I, if I would do this again, the way I would try to do it is really, really going deep with the customers before you roll it out, and really talk about it, have a solid customer community where you can actually, I think it's fair to be able to ask these questions and say why you're doing it, and because at the end of the day you're doing it to be able to make the software better, to add more people, to continue on the business, and like really be frank. And that's why we need to do this shift. And like so you can talk with them and say and ask them questions. So I would go much spend a lot of time with focus groups, and really trying to test the different aspects of what I'm trying to roll out, instead of, surprise, uh,
And
and
of course, for everybody else, it'll be a surprise. But it sounds like what you're saying is by doing those focus groups, you can kind of listen in advance and be prepared for
I
your
mean,
rollout
it's only a
plan.
surprise for your existing customers. It's not a surprise for your new customers, because they don't. That's kind of so we gotta just make sure that the existing ones, that it will work for that as well. I mean, it's kind of the same as, when you have a software that and you're trying to hit the new vertical, like I said, and you need to do something with the software. You got to make sure that you're not screwing up for the other people that are depending on the software to do work, right? Because that's very easy to do. Like, you're trying to make it simple, the software, and all of a sudden it becomes harder for the people that are advanced. It just adds on to their, so yeah, trying to think
Yeah,
of it in those ways.
I remember working with some finance executives during some of these times from my past, and I remember one of them asking, like, "All right, why is everybody getting so upset?" And I'm like, "They're using this tool to do a job, and you just messed up their workflow, or we just messed up their workflow." So it is really interesting to think about like the impact that you have on people when you make this change. Does it change their underlying business model? Like, if I'm a photographer and you go to subscription for Capture One software, and then all of a sudden you jack it up, 10x what I was going to spend last year on it. Maybe you messed up my photography business or something like that. I'm not saying they all went to that extreme, but I think the impact side is a really important
Yeah.
side. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and I even think that there were some instances where that happened, and we had to roll back uh, fairly fast. So it's a tough one. I mean, I think it goes back into, when you do this, that you also, I mean, the finance part is important, right? Like, because there's going to be a different type of money that's coming in, right? I mean, if you're starting from no subscriptions, right, then you're starting with very little money that will build up under slow time. So you need to be able to, okay, well, can we afford this switch, and how much is going to uh, this investment cost before we're starting to see the flip where it starts to kind of the flywheel starts to uh, uh, actually be more and more profitable. So uh, I think that's important, because that's preventing this. Oh no, shit, we're not getting enough money. Stop everything. Let's do these 50% campaigns. 50% off, 50% off, or stuff like that.
Yeah, good partnership with your finance team. That's a great point. And so then on the keeping customers during the transition, managing the negative impact feedback from the community that such a shift might cause. It sounded like you were suggesting folks talk to their customers in advance and learn what the concerns will be. I also heard you mention be frank, and I think like if I had two points I would share about this transition, it would be in your announcement email, put the legacy entitlements at the top of the email. Start with who's not affected,
Yeah.
because that's the people that are going to complain first. And if you start with your reasoning, like we're changing our business because of reasons, they're just going to say you're switching me to subscription and go to hell or whatever. And
I
so
mean,
in this, the second one is be frank though, and that was what you mentioned, and it was like don't use the flowery language. Just tell them what you're doing, and like an adult, tell them why. And if it's for business reasons and you need a successful growing business to continue to invest in the software they love, be honest about that. That was my take. It sounded like some overlap with yours, but how do you think about that?
no, that is exactly that. Be frank and honest. And I think I would add another one. I mean, use your advocates. I mean, try to win over a customer like one on one, or invite them in for drinks, and try to get them to help you in the community if you have that, to try to uh, uh, help this transition, because many times, and especially in the capture one, there a lot of customers that are like the old one, the really pros, like they would help people, right? And they can help you advocate for it, and they kind of try to just bicker with each other and like, well, they're just doing it for money, and then someone comes in, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, but it takes money to continue to provide this software for us, so we gotta trust that it's a good reason. So a lot of those conversations can be solved by advocacy customers.
Yeah, I've
So
had success in the past with I've had success I've had success in the past with like advocacy boards, advisory boards with software, where you can start to build up, folks that are contributing and giving insights for the roadmap and how the community is managed. But then also, of course, they themselves can become advocates, and sometimes they agree with the decisions, and sometimes they don't. But I found that to be helpful. And then, like you said, being frank. What I found was that when we were frank, people would read it, understand it, and if somebody else in a thread or forum somewhere was complaining about it, they would say, "Well, this was a reason, and it seemed pretty reasonable to me, but I understand you don't want to pay more," something like that. But not even people we spoke to, but because we were frank, people started being frank with how they explained it to others when it came up. So, did you have any similar experiences?
yeah, I'm just going to Sylvie, one second there. David, you gotta go to bed now. Yeah, go to mama or Lucy. Okay. Sorry, sorry about that. Where do we pick up?
So that was my experience. Did you have anything similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I think it really it's really nice to see those communities fight for you, right? I mean, it's really, really cool. It's such a tremendous help, and I think, you know, building a great product and building a brand, that's what you get. You can get these really these advocates, and you need to really, really take care of them. And with your customer support team being in the front lines, and or your CSMs, you know, uh, make sure that they get treated. And the way we did this, I think in Capture One, we looked at when we got customer support cases, we always tried to look which group they were in. And if we saw that, okay, well, if this was a customer, if they asked a question like that, hey, even if they were wrong, if we see that they've been with us for 10 years and they've been an active user, I mean, we would do anything, right, for them to be happy, even if it's like, well, it was their fault that they, whatever it may be. I can't think of what it is, but
It's
it's
such a great
important.
example because it, in my mind, is such a critical part of all this, which is to show folks that you care. Like, if you care about the future of the product, if you care about the quality of the product, if you care about your customer's experience with it, and you care about making the shift from one time to recurring successful for both the company and the customer, that goes so far in helping folks understand why a business might be changing their billing model. And I think from my experience, I've seen people really, really respond and recognize that. And it sounds like that was a strategy for you all there at Capture One.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
awesome. Well, this has been great. I wish we had more time next time in person. We'll have to run our next Zoom call together or something. We'll have to nerd out about this. But thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story here. I think there's folks got a lot of value, especially if they're thinking about going through this themselves. So thanks, Fred.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. It's a great topic to talk about.
All right. Well, half my gray hairs are from that kind of migration. So good luck to anyone out there gaining your own gray hairs right now. If you'd like to learn more about what Fred is up to, you can look him up on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here on the Growth Stage podcast. I'm your host, David Vogelpol. Really appreciate you joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.